What is a monster if not just an animal we don't know? Gabbie Hanna. So I'm going to be talking about the fight I tried to hide from you. And Trisha Can't Stop Lying. If you want to know my thoughts on Trisha, I made a video. I'm not going to debate their mental illness. They have one. And I will point out the hypocrisy of what Gabbie wants, but does not practice with Trisha. Gabbie tries to be a mental health advocate, but oftentimes mental health advocacy comes with people lacking sympathy for less sympathetic groupings of diagnoses, a lot of which Trisha falls under. Gabbie has participated in this multiple times, and this just shows you the hypocrisy. The amount of times Gabbie has villainized her mother because they're mentally ill is just beyond me. Having BPD didn't make Gabbie's mom a monster. Her actions did. Not everyone with BPD needs to be painted as a horrible monster just because her mom had it. The amount of villainizing of mental illnesses online hurts me. The fact that people can make a whole YouTube videos and say things like, they aren't mentally ill, they're just liars, shows me that some people can't even have a lick of sympathy for real mental health conditions. We have to look at people's actions, and holding someone accountable doesn't have to come at the cost of denying their mental illnesses or villainizing their mental illnesses. Something that Gabbie can learn, as well as so many others. The podcast I tried to hide from you. Gabbie opens up this video with a black screen to text reading, for almost 2 years, Trisha has been dedicated to telling the world we never met, we were never friends, and they never even watched any of my videos. They have successfully convinced millions that I am delusional, dangerous, obsessed stalker who imagined a year-long friendship with them. Just know that when I say they, them, Gabbie probably used she, her. The really weird thing about this all is Gabbie could have stopped everything that happened with Trisha if Gabbie just never talked to Trisha after the first time Trisha ghosted her. Like, to me, it just doesn't make sense. Because Gabbie, like Trisha, wouldn't let it go. But Gabbie doesn't need to reply or care, so it just seems like toddlers fighting. It's very clear, not just with Trisha, but throughout all this series, that Gabbie takes things out of context and way too personally. And that's clear when Gabbie gets mad that Trisha said in a live that they don't want any YouTuber books. And Gabbie took that way too personally, even though Trisha never said her name, and she's not the only YouTuber who has written a book, nor will she be the last. So I don't even get why Gabbie's upset about this. It's not based in logic. Then they talk about the STD incident, and Gabbie tries to justify the reasoning in telling Jason. But honestly, there's no justification in my mind. Gabbie says she wanted to inform her friend. But right, if you were a good friend and you wanted them to find out in a way that would provide the least amount of pain to them, the only real way you could tell them then is to tell their partner that I heard this rumor and I don't know if it's true, but it's going around and you should talk to Jason about it before he gets hurt by hearing it from someone else who is not their partner. By Gabbie going out of her way to tell Jason, Gabbie wasn't just inflicting pain on Trisha. Gabbie was purposely inflicting pain upon Jason. Gabbie also pieces parts together of Trisha gushing over Gabbie's art, music, and comedy, but I don't think it proves they were friends. Because Trisha was a fan. Not every fan likes the person who created the art or cares. Trisha might like Gabbie's music, but dislike Gabbie. Gabbie also tries to define friendship to Trisha over and over again, but fails to realize friendship is uniquely defined by everyone, based on their life. I have a hard time calling people friends because of my past trauma, and that's okay. We can choose when we consider someone friends or not. Throughout this podcast, it was clear that Gabbie tries to push her own narrative on Trisha, and how Trisha is just lying or gaslighting her. But honestly, I don't see that. What I do see is Trisha trying to hold to what they remember as fact, even if that's spotty and not always reliable because Trisha's mentally ill. There is something to be said about gaslighting and lying because of your mental illness, but that's not purposeful. Trisha can't stop lying. Gabbie starts off this by going into a weird tangent on how she feels like her old self, and how she's happy about that. and then says she's a workaholic and how she's doing that again. And I'm lost to how that's a good thing. And how she can't sleep because she just wants to keep working. And how she's excited and fulfilled by her work. And I'm still lost to how that's a good thing. She then talks about how she thought this was bipolar and told her therapist about this obsessiveness. But then she flashes cards saying it was her ADHD. And honestly speaking, it could be her ADHD. But I still don't understand why doing this now is a good thing. Then Gabbie talks about Bad Baby and Turnabout Ranch and how we should stop picking on Bad Baby. And I think what happened at Turnabout Ranch was gross, but I can still find Catch Me Outside, How About That, funny. I hate that her mom thought that airing their family issues on national TV was a good idea. I don't like Dr. Phil and his practices, but we should be honest here. How much would we have cared about the Turnabout Ranch thing if Bad Baby didn't speak out? And if we go and follow that, she got her voice by becoming famous because of that meme, because she is so unique. How many people go on Dr. Phil and we don't remember them now? But Danielle's uniqueness was what made us remember her. Gabbie also says that Danielle was just a kid and didn't deserve to be treated like a monster. But I find that funny coming from Gabbie, who threatened children on multiple occasions. Gabbie also says Danielle doesn't present herself as a kid, but that statement is gross and pedo-apologetics. Because if you didn't see her as a kid, then that's on you, not presentation or anything. I never saw her as anything but a kid who was going through a lot. Then Gabbie talks about how she feels people become emotionally stunted at the age they found fame because they can get what they want. She talks about how she feels she did and also how she places that on Danielle. But I reject that. Danielle has aged and matured. You can choose to grow. It's a choice. Gabbie chooses not to. Fame and money make it easier for you not to choose to grow up, but that was Gabbie's choice. And I don't think Gabbie should place that on Danielle, because Danielle has matured. She expresses why would she change when she got an MTV deal and a book deal just by asking. This is gross to me that she actively chose not to change and keeps trying to justify that. When she talks about Dixie D'Amelio's music career and who wouldn't want to take a contract to make music if they were offered. So I will answer that one. Me, myself, I would not ever take a music contract even if I was offered, because I know I can't sing. And honestly, Gabbie places so much of her own feelings on others, it's exhausting. Then Gabbie talks about how she doesn't get the hate Dixie and her sister get because they won the lotto and we just didn't play. Missing the fact that TikTok is notorious for BIPOC actively playing, making up dances and trends that get used by white creators who then get famous because systemic racism. And people are more drawn to white, conventionally attractive women because we have built-in bias. So when Gabbie says it's just people who aren't trying hard, who aren't winning, makes me think she really doesn't understand the issues around TikTok. She then talks about how she just hated successful women because she was jealous. But also I'd like to point out the hypocrisy in that because she can't understand that when her fans did that to her. Then she talks about Free Britney and how she used to talk shit about Britney. That's why she's so passionate about speaking about freeing her, and how she was sucked into the hate train because everyone told her to hate Britney. And I don't understand. Maybe it's just me and the parts of the internet I was on, but most people just thought Britney was mentally ill and that the tabloids drove her to the breaking point and that she needed help. I don't know anyone who hated her other than Christina Aguilera fans, but that's a different story. The thing with Britney is tragic because instead of getting the help she actually needed, she was forced into more madness by her family, who she should have been able to trust. Conservatorships aren't the problem. It is when people can use those laws to traumatize and imprison someone that's the problem. And there needs to be reform on those laws. Then she says what happened to Meghan Markle was disgusting. And I agree, but I don't get why she links all these people when they're different issues. Meghan's issue wasn't the press. It was the fact that the royal family is willing to abuse her and use her to hide other scandals like a sacrificial lamb and be racist on top of that. She talks about how Black women's voices aren't heard and pointed to childbirth, but actually it's not just childbirth. In the medical field in general, Black women and men are less likely to be listened to about anything. If they're feeling pain, if their kids are in pain, there is a lot of built-in racism in the medical field. She says it's because doctors think Black people lie, but that's an oversimplification of a complex problem that is so far-reaching and systematic. Honestly, Gabbie bringing this all up, Meghan, Britney, Bad Baby, in a video to hate on someone else is weird. It's out of place to me. It feels like she's trying to make us relate her to these people who have been shown to be highly sympathetic people. She seemingly has a moment of self-awareness when she says maybe she's the common denominator and why no one likes her, and that's why she wrote Monster. But then she smashes that by saying she begged a therapist to tell her she was crazy, not realizing even well-adjusted people can be toxic to some people. Someone not liking you doesn't have to do with mental illness. She then says her negative thoughts just keep replaying over and over again, and she just wants to get rid of them, and how that's ADHD. And it can be, but also it can be PTSD, and a myriad of other mental health conditions. That's the thing, and this is why I strongly think that anyone talking about mental illness should be completely upfront about diagnoses. She says she has to remember the past because she fears she won't remember reality. But that's not how that works. I don't even understand. I remember things that I probably should forget, but also my mind has erased parts of my life, and I'm pretty sure I still remember reality. Most people can't remember everything that has ever happened to them, and they still remember reality. She says she's in a toxic relationship with everyone telling her a reality she doesn't find to be true. But this sounds like she really doesn't understand what she's done wrong. The facts are this. People can be upset with you. You are the common denominator, that's true. There are two paths you can take at this point. Don't care or change. Gabbie doesn't want to take either, which in my opinion is why she's so messed up about this. She talks about how she was essayed by a celebrity and how she had to make it out to be a goofy story on a story time and how she had to make it funny to make it okay. And Gabbie seems upset with herself that she did this, but I would also like to point out that's a normal coping mechanism and you shouldn't hate yourself for doing that. At this point, Gabbie Hanna talks about how she had life-ending thoughts, and I want to point this out because after this series is over, she got a wellness check called on her and acted like she didn't know where anyone would get the idea that she would hurt herself. I'm not going to go into the debate on whether wellness checks are good or a bad thing. I just wanted to point this out. Now we're finally going back to Trisha. Gabbie says Trisha doubled down on their lies. Let me propose another theory. Trisha's mentally ill. Gabbie says she wants to be left alone by Trisha. But Gabbie, throughout this whole entire thing, proves that Gabbie cannot leave Trisha alone. And Gabbie keeps insisting Trisha and her were friends. Like, why does that matter when you want to be left alone? Then just leave Trisha alone. Realize Trisha has a mental illness, and it might not be a lie. Trisha reached out to Gabbie about the rice gum thing. Something that Trisha doesn't remember doing. But Gabbie has proof Trisha did this. But again, Trisha's mentally ill, and memory's an issue with the mental illnesses that Trisha has claimed to have. I honestly just don't want to hear it from Gabbie. I don't. I agree, hold people accountable, but Gabbie is asking us to forgive and forget because of her mental health issues, but can't give the same energy to Trisha. So I just want Gabbie to stop. Gabbie says that it's so confusing, but it's not. It really isn't. Trisha can't remember things. That can just be a symptom of mental illness, which Trisha has admitted to having. Gabbie keeps going off on how Trisha mocked her and wouldn't leave her alone, but doesn't see the irony in this at all. Gabbie says it's weird that Trisha is obsessed, and let's follow that thought. Is it weird? Because Trisha's mentally ill. Could it be the logical conclusion to everything Gabbie is saying? But Gabbie doesn't follow logic? No, because it doesn't fit the narrative she's trying to frame. Because if she did, she would have to realize she can't bring up Trisha because it breaks the rules of what she wants others to do for her. Also, Gabbie shows the music videos and how they look alike, but honestly, Gabbie's video was milquetoast, and I've seen it by others. Then the STD thing comes up again, and Gabbie justifies how she went about telling people of an STD, and again, I stick to my first point. Then Gabbie talks about how she misremembers Trisha inviting them to Thanksgiving, and how she forgets things, but also not realizing the hypocrisy in that statement because other people can't forget. No, only she gets a pass. Gabbie says what she didn't like is everyone associated Trisha and Gabbie together, and she could have let it go if people didn't. They talk about a lot of people, but you know what Gabbie could have done? Just said no comment and don't reply to people or act like you know them. Who cares what other people think if you're not picking up what Trisha's putting down? People would have stopped associating them together. Gabbie then talks about how when Trisha was going through dark things, Gabbie reached out, and that's not her place to do. If someone was last mean to you, them reaching out to you seems a lot more like manipulation than it does genuine concern. And honestly, Gabbie's guilty of getting mad at people who do the same thing. So it's a pot calling the kettle black on this one, in my opinion. Then Gabbie says a drop of self-awareness would take you far, and I think she should take her own advice here. Gabbie goes on to talk about the song that they wrote for Trisha, and Gabbie says she doesn't start drama to promote her music. But you know what? There was zero reason for us to know that that song was about Trisha. So Gabbie was just drumming up drama. Then she talks about how she deleted all her socials after a song release in a manic episode. I don't even know what to say about this. Gabbie then says Trisha says to other people that Gabbie doesn't like them. Gabbie says this is because Trisha doesn't like themselves and wants to paint Gabbie as a bad person, but I don't think that paints someone as a bad person. Not everyone will like you. Trisha can believe that Gabbie doesn't like them and even tell everyone,
I think Gabbie doesn't like me.
That doesn't make Gabbie a bad person. Not everybody likes each other. Is this high school? Like, I thought we were all adults and we understood that you can just not like other people. Gabbie wants to be left alone by Trisha, but can't stop talking about Trisha. So, yeah, kind of like peas in a pod. So in hopes to get Trisha to leave her alone, Gabbie goes and talks to Gabbie DiMartino about Trisha. Like, make that make sense? Because to me, that seems more like an escalation than a leave me alone move. Gabbie doesn't understand why Trisha tells people about how Gabbie hurt them by saying they had herpes, because that's them outing themselves. No, it's not, because Trisha says they don't have it. They said you spread rumors. That's not outing themselves. Like, I just don't understand how that's outing themselves. Also, Gabbie said she asked Gabbie D if she could talk to Trisha about what they said to Gabbie D. And that doesn't really sound like she wanted Trisha to just leave her alone. Gabbie then says Trisha has it in their head that they're allowed to talk about people, but others aren't allowed to talk about them because it's triggering to them. Failing to realize that that's exactly what Gabbie wants out of others. It's a hypocrisy that just seems to fly right over Gabbie's head. That gets me. Trisha should be held accountable for their actions and mistakes, but I don't want to hear it from someone who doesn't want to take responsibility for theirs and doesn't want anyone to try to hold them accountable because they have a mental health condition. So they should hold the same energy for Trisha. Because wanting one standard for yourself and not applying it to others shows it's a standard that no one can live up to. And you're making a high pedestal so you can be justified in being let down, so you can feel like the victim.